This video is the first in a series looking at anti-heroes in film, TV, literature and history. Anti-heroes reflect qualities we may not want to see in ourselves, making them accessible and realistic. We identify more with those who are unhappy, desperate, frustrated and go against a failed system. They reject societal constraints and expectations that are imposed upon us. Anti-heroes give our grievances a voice. They make us feel like something right is being done, even if it's legally wrong. The attraction people have to the anti-hero is that we can relate to their poor decisions and selfishness. Anti-heroes liberate us because they behave how we sometimes wish we could. They are sometimes like you and I. We start with a classic literary character whose author has a surprisingly deep connection to Sherlock Holmes and his creator, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. He ranks as the second most popular literary character of his era, second only to Sherlock Holmes. A creation who is the polar opposite of Holmes and yet has many similarities with him. A creation supposedly partly inspired by Oscar Wilde, amongst others. A character so popular that the author of 1984, George Orwell, wrote about him. This character is A.J. Raffles, the gentleman thief. Set in Victorian England, these tales follow the adventures and escapades of amateur cracksman, burglar, gentleman and famed cricketer A.J. Raffles. His accomplice and biographer is Bunny Manders, who narrates the stories and looks up to Raffles. One might even say adores him. Raffles uses his cricketing fame to maintain his prominent position in high society. He views burglary instead of cricket as a sporting challenge. Ernest William Hornung was a prolific writer despite his ill health and was living in London and working as a journalist in 1888. This was during the time that Jack the Ripper was active, resulting in the 5 infamous, grisly Whitechapel murders. It was during this period that he unsurprisingly developed an interest in criminal behaviour, and his writing reflected this. And in 1893, Hornung married Constance Doyle, one of the sisters of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the creator of Sherlock Holmes. Hornung had written a story about a public school criminal who is shielded from the law by a man he knew from their school days. Hornung had killed the villain off at the end of the story. His famous brother-in-law Arthur stated that it was a shame he had killed the character, as a public school villain would be a great new figure for a series. Why not revive him, he asked. Sherlock Holmes was inspired by the real-life figure of Dr. Joseph Bell, a surgeon at the Royal Infirmary of Edinburgh, whom Conan Doyle met in 1877 and had worked for as a clerk. And like Holmes, Bell was noted for drawing broad conclusions from minute observations. Copying his famous brother-in-law, Hornung used a former acquaintance, George Cecil Ives, as inspiration for Raffles. Ives was a Cambridge-educated writer, poet, criminologist, reformer, and a pioneering first-class cricketer. He lectured and wrote about prison reform and crime and punishment. Holmes was known for his clinical efficiency, moral conscience, respect for the law, neurotic mania, and his emotional sterility. Hornung stripped these traits away and replaced them, giving Raffles almost hypnotic charisma, playfulness, and a love of risk-taking bordering on the dangerous. A.J. Raffles is the polar opposite of Holmes, yet both share a debonair elegance befitting of their social class, intellects, and personal tastes. Most tellingly, Raffles, unlike Holmes, has a cavalier disregard for the moral rules which prevailed in late 19th century England. And as Holmes has the stalwart and dependable Dr. Watson as his companion, so Raffles has Henry "Bunny" Manders. Bunny is portrayed as being highly strung, vulnerable, but extremely loyal. He is often in awe of Raffles' charismatic personality and abilities. As Watson documents Holmes's adventures, so too does Bunny, albeit in a far more hysterical manner. Some sources state that Raffles and Bunny were at least partly fictionalised versions of Oscar Wilde and Lord Alfred Douglas, also known as Bosie. Wilde, it was claimed at the time, led Bosie astray, as Raffles constantly does to Bunny. Wilde's possible involvement in Raffles' genesis is further strengthened by the fact that Hornung and his wife Constance were both good friends of the famous playwright. In short, Hornung created a literary inverse of Holmes and gave the world A.J. Raffles, dedicating his book to Sir Arthur Conan Doyle as a homage. Interestingly, Doyle did not warm to the idea that the suave Raffles, a professional thief, made his living from a life of crime. He once wrote of Raffles, "One must not make the criminal a hero." The Raffles stories begin in 1891, 3 years after the fearful reign of Jack the Ripper, and end with the Boer War in 1899. Queen Victoria sits upon the throne and the empire continues to flourish. As a result of the Industrial Revolution, the initially slow advance and impact of technology on public life was rapidly gaining speed. The miraculous railway and postal system was enabling the expansion of business, commerce, and communication. Isambard, Kingdom Brunel, and others were building bridges, roads, canals, tunnels, and steam-driven ships, the likes of which had never been seen. Photography had captured for the first time in history an army at war in the Crimea. The camera was now becoming more accessible and even affordable to the general public. Advances in the production of machine tools, chemicals, glass-making, agriculture, textiles, and transport were having a radical impact on the country. The Dickensian poverty of Britain was still present, but life for the poorest was showing signs of improvement in terms of nutrition, standards of living, sanitation, literacy, clothing, medicine, and opportunity. Social mobility for the lower classes was slowly but surely becoming a reality. And into this new, exciting and smog-filled world, we find Raffles and Bunny. Due to social mobility afforded to their families, they are both able to attend public boarding school. But neither come from old money. They have mixed in upper-class circles, but remain on the outskirts of well-to-do society. And both have the taste for expensive upper-class living. Scotch whisky, Sullivan cigarettes, gambling, and expensive boarding rooms. Raffles encounters Bunny many years after they attended public school together. Bunny is financially desperate after losing all of his money gambling and knowing the cheques he has written to account for his losses will bounce. This assures him of social ruin, and he drastically plays with the idea of ending it all. Raffles offers to help, but asks whether he has the pluck, that is to say, if he is daring enough. Raffles then confesses his own financial situation, which is almost as bad as Bunny's, and admits to him, though rather indirectly at first, that he is in fact a thief. And more than that, he is a first-class amateur safe-breaker or cracksman and burglar, with a particular taste for jewellery, in particular diamonds. And so their story starts, with Raffles using his fame as England's best slow bowling cricketer to gain invitations to play cricket at the houses and stately homes of the fabulously rich and wealthy. His boarding school learnt etiquette, legendary cricketing skills, and personal charm ensure that he is constantly asked about for his cricket. And it is at these cricket matches and the stately dinners and balls that follow them that he engages in his real passion, stealing and safe-breaking. He never steals from his hosts, as that would be ungentlemanly and, quite simply put, not done. He has no issue with stealing from his deserving fellow guests, however, and he uses Bunny as a mostly unwitting cover, usually telling Bunny of his exploits after he has carried them out. He is loyal to Bunny, and Bunny returns this loyalty tenfold, but his employment of Bunny sometimes borders on the exploitative. He exposes Bunny to danger, but has an unwavering confidence in Bunny's genuinely expressed naive manner and often bewilderment to the goings-on around him. Bunny's highly strung behaviours almost always convince others of his and Raffles' innocence. Like Holmes, Raffles continually finds himself in a variety of difficult and dangerous situations. They constantly present a risk to his life and his secret criminal lifestyle being uncovered. In addition to the fact that Raffles is a cracksman with a conscience, there are times when he emerges as a justice figure, using his skill at theft to right wrongs and to resolve grievances. He confronts a loathsome and exploitative moneylender to whom a friend is heavily indebted. In his confrontations with the man, the situation turns violent and the usurer ends up dead by his own actions. His friend is ready to give himself up to the law, but Raffles persuades him otherwise, escorts him to Liverpool, and then sees him off on his way to America. He also extends similar assistance to a fellow professional thief who has recently escaped from a prison. This criminal, however, threatens to expose Raffles if he is not assisted in leaving England. Acknowledging the unspoken criminal code between them, and having very little choice in the matter, Raffles helps the desperate man flee the country. In the story The Criminologist Club, Bunny and Raffles are invited to a sumptuous dinner by 4 well-to-do amateur crime enthusiasts. Bunny later overhears that the enthusiasts have correctly deduced that Raffles is the gentleman thief whose recent crimes have appeared in the newspapers. They plan to confront him at the dinner table. The butler suddenly informs the diners that the house has been burgled, which immediately clears Raffles of suspicion. He informs Bunny afterwards that he was aware of the trap and had broken into the house the night before, in a manner suggesting that it had been burgled during their dinner. At a school reunion dinner, Raffles takes an instant dislike to a former student and acquaintance. He decides to make this man unwittingly pay for a new commemorative statue to be installed at their former school when he is dead set against it. He achieves this by robbing his home and then anonymously donating the ill-gotten proceedings to the statue fund. Raffles also evades traps and mechanisms of death designed to catch and incapacitate him. In the story A Trap to Catch a Cracksman, Raffles is poisoned by a cunningly contrived bottle of very expensive whiskey during a break-in. Shortly before he succumbs to its effects, he's able to switch the poison bottle with another. This ensures that his captors are themselves drugged when they drink a toast to celebrate his capture, allowing him to barely escape. Raffles also has a near-fatal brush with the Camorra, a vengeful and extremely capable Italian crime family. Raffles is abducted and attached to a deadly grandfather clock of all things, which is wired to trigger a revolver shot at a certain time. Bunny almost unwittingly saves him with seconds to spare. And in the most British of crime capers, Raffles steals a highly expensive gold cup from the British Museum, only to then post it anonymously to Queen Victoria inside a biscuit tin, as a gift to mark her diamond jubilee. Quite the English gentleman indeed. The author thankfully did not heed the direction of his famous brother-in-law about not making a criminal the hero. He presents Raffles as he truly is, a thief and a criminal. But as his adventures progress, we are left in no doubt that he is a cut well above the usual felons and ne'er-do-wells that also practice his dark arts. Raffles is a highly principled thief with a strong sense of morality. The Industrial Revolution saw many significant social changes, one of which was the rise of the New Woman. Despite not yet having the right to vote, something unthinkable by today's standards, women were pushing against the prison wall-like social boundaries society had long since imposed upon them. The female characters Raffles and Bunny encounter are confident, self-aware, respectable and literate, if not well-educated. They exercise control over their own lives, be it personal, social or economic, much more so than previous generations. In short, many of them are new women, independent females seeking radical, long overdue social change for their gender. They seek achievement and self-fulfillment beyond the realm of marriage and family. Perhaps Hornung and his wife's friendship with the socially progressive Oscar Wilde had some minor role in the inclusion of these tenacious females in the Raffles stories. Hornung kept abreast of current scientific and technological developments and was keen to incorporate these advanced wonders into his writing. Raffles rents expensive rooms at the Albany Hotel, which are heated by oil and coal initially, but later luxuriously by electricity and gas. His expensive bachelor pad also sports a newfangled device called a telephone. Raffles regularly makes use of the steam-driven train to attend various cricketing matches around the country, which also afford him ample opportunity to pilfer and steal afterwards. One of his many tricks is to send telegrams from different train station locations, seemingly confirming his presence there, misleading any investigators as to his exact location. And one of the most climactic scenes in the books takes place aboard a steamship, with Raffles faking his own death by jumping overboard whilst the ship is at sea. Like Sherlock Holmes using technology to aid in his detection of crime, Raffles instead uses technology to aid in committing crimes. Raffles and Bunny belonged to a time when Victorian moral standards were strongly prevalent. Many of them were good, some not so much. The abolition of slavery and child labour, legislation against cruelty to animals, and falling crime rates were some of the notable positives. The negative perception of pregnancy out of wedlock, affairs, public drunkenness, and being convicted of a non-serious crime were not so progressive. The Victorian phrase describing something socially taboo or unacceptable was, "It's not done." And the outcome if you committed an act which was not done? You were essentially avoided, shunned, uninvited to desirable social gatherings, and gossiped about behind your back. The Victorians had their own type of cancel culture well before today's current interpretation. Raffles' risk of being discovered, socially ruined, and cancelled is a constant peril which he seeks to evade throughout his shady adventures. The one inescapable element throughout these extraordinary stories is justice. Raffles cheerfully declares he would rob St. Paul's Cathedral, but would never from a shop till, nor would he steal from an old lady. He sees human nature as a drafts board and asks Bunny, why should anyone be all one colour or the other? He disarmingly observes that his outlook is wrong, but then justifies it by saying that the distribution of wealth is very wrong to begin with. This recognition of the problems of the distribution of wealth is the recurrent subtext that gives many of Hornung's stories their peculiar power. However, it is best realised by focusing on Raffles, whose motivations are clearly shown to be revenge and class hatred. Although he attended good schools, Raffles recognises that he is accepted by high society only because his athletic prowess can be exploited. Were he not a talented cricketer, available to play for the landed nobility in their personal competitions, he would be utterly dismissed. We were in society, but not of it, he says bitterly to Bunny on one occasion, and I was only asked about for my cricket. Raffles is quietly angry about the fine society he can never be truly a part of. He steals with no regret, and almost always from those who perhaps deserve it. He will never have their advantages in life, and is unconcerned about the morals of his actions. He steals to enjoy the finer things that he has experienced and has become accustomed to. And we, the readers, support and enjoy his morally muddy adventures. We are unsure if, in his escapades, he will succeed, find himself in a prison cell, or on the inside of a coffin. Our liking of him is comparable to our continuing affection and interest in the pirates of the high seas. We know what they're doing is wrong, but there is something sympathetically alluring about the have-nots fighting to exist in a financially unfair world. They steal to improve their quality of life and to perhaps secure a brighter future for their friends and families. And we simply cannot help but enjoy their daring and nefarious adventures and misdeeds along the way. The British press used Raffles as a synonym for a real-life thief in at least 47 newspaper headlines and articles between 1905 and 1939. Headline examples include Raffles in Real Life in 1907 and A Modern Raffles in 1939. My favourite headline being A Feminine Raffles Comes to Grief, used by the Los Angeles Times in 1927. George Orwell used Raffles in a paper critically discussing literature which focused on the criminal. He describes Raffles not as an honest man who has gone astray, but as a public school man who has gone astray. Such was the popularity of Raffles that he was brought to life in several plays during the author's lifetime, something which must have been very satisfying for Hornung to see. There have been 4 theatre productions of Raffles, 12 films, and 2 TV adaptations, the most notable being 1975's Yorkshire Television 13-episode series. It stars Anthony Valentine as our favourite gentleman thief and sports some very young, very familiar faces. This series is strongly recommended as it's very faithful to the books. Raffles almost certainly influenced French author Maurice Leblanc in his creation of Arsène Lupin in 1905. Raffles also inspired author Leslie Charteris to create The Saint in 1928. This book was adapted into a very successful TV series starring Bond actor Roger Moore. Raffles' character also makes a significant appearance in Alan Moore's ingenious The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen graphic novel. The BBC is due to make a new production of Raffles written by Suki Fisher, but remains in early, if any, development. But given the BBC's promotion of The Message, an ideology which constricts and negates original, emotive and daring ideas external to its narrative, I wait its release with much trepidation. Raffles continues to retain his unique charm and appeal well over 100 years after his creation. There is something still appealing about a top-hatted gentleman thief going about his dark proclivities in the dimly lit Victorian, smog-filled London streets. His rather fluid moral code assuring the educated reader of his day, and maybe still of ours, that he is one of us. Thanks very much for listening. Please like, comment and subscribe.